Hi, I'm not sure if anybody's out there. Um, just getting set up here. So if there is anyone out there, hello, hello. I hope you're having a good day. Please let me know if you're there, if you can hear me okay. Dog is whining at the door, so until I see that somebody's there, I'll just go in. Okay, well, I'm not sure if anybody's there or not, but I'm going to get started. Oh, hey, Darlene, thanks for joining. It's always a little bit weird to think that I'm talking to myself, so it helps when you guys say that you're there. Hope you're having a nice day. It's gorgeous out. So I'm going to get started so that we are not here all day on such a nice day. So, as usual, I'm going to, oh, good, that's good, thanks. I'm going to start with the sketches that I've done in the last couple of weeks. So this was our last Sketchy Saturday. And then for the last couple of weeks, I've just really had a bit of an urge to do my sketches in my TV, my TV sketches. So I watched A Knight's Tale. Oh, hi, Joanne. It's so nice to see you here. I watched A Knight's Tale last last Sunday, I think it was. It must have been. And so I took a bunch of screenshots, and throughout the week I've sketched a little ink sketch every day, and then these ones I just surrounded with a little bit of colored pencil. Hi, Sue. Nice to see you here. So those are the sketches that I've done for the past couple of weeks. They're very rough, as you can see, totally out of proportion, but that's okay. I don't care. So it's a really great if you're ever watching TV, try and do it in pen. And if you make a mistake, no big deal. But it's really good for practicing proportions and things like that. So that, and we're going to get started today. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. Good. There we are. Everybody survived the windstorm, I hope. It was pretty amazing. Oh, so this is what we're going to be doing this time around. This little seagull and the rock, and obviously it's going to be very sketchy. I'm going to be using, I don't know which ones I will be using. I will probably, at least in the rock, be using an HB, a 4H, and a 4B. So we've got the hard, the medium, and this very soft pencil. I might be using a stump. I will probably be using a, whoopsie, what's that? It's tape. Okay. Anyway, probably be using a soft brush. I will also possibly be using my sharpened end of my brush in the rock. I'm not sure. We'll see how it goes. And probably a Tombow eraser just for some effects on the rock. So we're not going to get into too much detail. I just want to basically get the proper shapes in today and give you some idea of how I would shade the bird for a sketch, and some of the techniques that I might use for the rock. So as I said in my newsletter, if you're not signed up, if you happen to be watching this after the fact, you can sign up for my newsletter. The link is in the description, I think. And Yeah, I'm going to try and do this bird. I really like this picture, and I think that it would be a really fun one to do as a drawing. So I think I'm going to be doing that in the fall. So if you're at all interested in doing a drawing of this guy, I will let you know if and when I decide to do that. Okay, so we're going to get started. And I'm just going to do this small. I'm just doing it. This is a 5x8 sketchbook, so I'm just going to do it up in the top half of my page here. I wonder if I can zoom in a little more. Okay, so looking at the shape of this bird, first of all, I want to make sure that I get the whole body centered in my page and that I don't end up with his tail going off the page. That's probably one of the hardest things that I deal with is sizing on my page. So I want to make sure I'm starting small enough here to make sure I get the whole bird in, and I think we'll be okay if I go this size. So I'm starting with the head, and I'm just going very lightly with an HB pencil. And if you look at the base of the beak, where it meets his head, back to the back of his head, he's got a very oval, egg-shaped head. So I'm basically doing an oval for his head, kind of egg-shaped, a little bit wider at the back than it is at the front. I find when I try and draw slow, I don't get my shapes as well as I do when I go faster. So once you've got your shape in of your head, then I'm just looking at my reference here and I'm trying to judge the size of that head versus the size of all the rest of his body. So how long is that head compared to the neck? So without actually measuring, I'm not going to bother to measure. It looks like it's probably the neck to the back of the back, where his back is probably about one head length, maybe slightly longer. So I'm going to come down the back of his head, and you can just do a straight line back, a straight line down rather, and you want to do it about the same length of that the head is. And then the front, again, you can do a straight line down. We are going to refine these lines after. And the where his throat comes out at the base of that oval, you want to it's about a third of the way back. So a little bit further back, about the third of the length of his head, somewhere around there. So I come down the same length as it is to his back, and then it's probably another head length, a little bit longer down to the bottom where his chest is. And I know that this is not, look, it's all very straight, but that's, if you're just starting drawing, that's how you can get your shapes in. And then we'll refine those shapes afterwards. So once you've got the basic size there, am I going too fast? Please say if I go too fast. I keep looking at the chat, so if you have any comments going too fast or not explaining something well enough, please say. So if I look at the rest of the body, it's again very basic shape. It's a triangle. It's a sideways triangle, basically. Comes back. So again, I'm going not using you could use your pencil to measure if you want. You can, actually take measurements with your pencil, but I'm not going to bother because it's only a sketch. So I do want to emphasize that again. It's only a sketch. I don't care if it's right. I'm trying by sketching, I'm trying to train my eye to see. And if I end up with something that's completely off, then I know that I need a lot more training in that area, like I did with my that sketch of the man with his legs are just way out of proportion. So that was, obviously I would need a little bit either to spend more time or more attention doing that sketch next time if I do something similar. So I'm looking at the angle his back is coming down at. And I'm trying to keep it basically in proportion with that head. Okay, and then the triangle lines are very sorry, I'm losing my reference. So the lines are quite that the angle it comes down at, I've got my angle maybe a little bit too steep, but it's a little bit straighter. Same thing under the body. It's fairly straight. It comes up at a little bit of an angle, but it's reasonably straight. So once I've got those angles in, and then I know he's got a tail sticking out here. And thankfully I left enough room on my page that I've got that. So now that I've got, oh good, thank you, Joanne. So now that I've got my very, very basic shapes in, I'm going to go back and I'm going to refine them. Try and make it look a little bit more organic and like a seagull. So I like the shape of his head here, but obviously this should not be straight. This comes more in a little bit of an S form. So I just bring that in very slightly. And if you've drawn your first lines fairly light, then there's no problem to go over them. So I always start with a very light sketch usually. And then at the front, his head comes down a little bit more on an angle than what I've got it. So I'm going to refine that, bring it more to a point. And his beak is coming out pretty much dead center out of his head. And the beak is, if you look where the corner of his mouth is actually underneath his eye. And if you measure that to the end of his beak, from the corner of his mouth to the end of his beak, and the corner of his mouth to the back of his beak is just about the same length as his head. So a lot of my sketching time is spent just observing the angles, the sizes, comparing all the time. So I'm going to I can take out a straight line. Basically, I'm going to follow that line where the beak opens. So the line of the mouth opening, I'm going to bring that out on the angle that it comes out. That might be a little bit too straight. It comes down a little bit more, maybe. And then from that, I can, no, I'm having such a hard time seeing. I have my glasses on. I need to take them off. Okay, so now I'm going to actually try and shape that beak. So it comes down in very much of a hook at the very end, and it is about the same length as the head. Maybe I'll look at this picture, it's a little closer. And then it comes back to the head, like so. And then the head comes in, something like that. So this line of the beak, where the midline where his beak actually opens, I think I need to make it a little bit, tiny bit thicker on top. And then his eye, as I was saying last week, I think it was, with our little chickadee. Usually, many birds, their eye sits right on that line of the beak, either right on it or right above it. This guy obviously doesn't. It sits quite a bit higher back, higher up, and located more in the center of his head. So normally, if I was just going without looking at my reference, thinking, okay, all birds' eyes are there, I would be dead wrong on this one. And his eye, if you look closely at his eye, it's also very oval shaped. It's not terribly round. It's kind of round in the front and goes back in an oval. And it's right sort of in the center of his head, pretty close to the top. So just kind of something like that. I think mine is too high, maybe. My lines are kind of thick. Okay. And So you want to get the size. The size is important. Try and get the right size and the right shape. My shape is off, but I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so, and then we can erase this line so it doesn't look like he's got a ball sitting on top of his neck. And then that front of his throat is also going to go in an S, more of a very, very slight S shape, where his chest comes out. So it's more of a curved line. So you might have to adjust this to get your thickness of the throat correct. I think my neck at the back is maybe even a little bit long. Quite so long. Anyway, and his chest comes out, judging by the end of his beak. If I dropped a straight line down, it does not come out as far as his beak, but at the end of his beak, but it comes out about halfway. So not maybe not quite halfway. So you get a nice rounded, and then once you've got that, his chest comes down more on an angle. It's not rounded all the way around. It's kind of a bit on an angle. Okay. And then I'm going to correct at the back of his neck so it's not quite so long. And it comes down, I don't know what degree that would be. It's less than 45 degrees. But it's not quite straight, just off of straight. And it comes down. If I'm looking at the head, I want to see how long it would be. About 3 head lengths, not beak and head, but just the head. So 1, 2, about that long. And that's where his gray feathers end. Okay. And then underneath, right where the breastbone comes down, and then it starts to go level off, and then it starts to go up just very slightly. Okay, so that by the time you're done, that might be a little bit, actually, come down a little bit. By the time you're done, you've got something like that. You're going to have the white feathers that come out past the gray. So this is basically where the gray feathers end. You've got your white feathers coming out past that. And then you've got his tail, which is right near the top of where those white feathers are. Not that he doesn't have a tail, his tail feathers. And they don't come out that long. They come out like so, and then he's got a few more underneath. So something like that. Okay. And then looks more like a dove than a gull. Oh well. So then he's got his 2 legs, which the one that's furthest back is almost right dead center in his body. And where the knee joint is, which is way up high, almost under his body, that joint has a little bit of a, you can almost make it kind of like a bracket shape because it's a little bit wider there. And then that leg comes down, not exactly straight, but pretty straight. Something like that. And he's actually got feathers here that are coming over that. And then the other leg is a little bit forward. And again, it's got that knee joint. You can just kind of do 2 kind of bracket shapes. The joint at the front is a little bit lower on that leg. It looks like, oh no, it's not lower. I think it might, it's hard to see on the picture. It might be covered by feathers is all. I'm not too sure. It's hard to see. Anyway, and so that comes down like so. And then the back foot is hidden, but the front foot just comes out in a like this. We're not going to worry too much about the foot because we're going to be putting the rock underneath it. So if you want to just draw a line underneath to kind of indicate he's standing actually on something, and you can bring the other leg down. Make sure it's meeting. And my shape is right off. Oh well. A little bit too chesty there. His legs are too long, I think. Okay. So I want to give him a little bit more of a hook. So now as far as the shading goes, if you look at the eye in the picture, he's got a line of shading. And I'm still using the HB pencil. If you have a 4H and you want to change to that, you can. It'll give you it'll give you subtler shading. I'll stick with my HB in case you don't have that. So his eye is dark, and his eyeball inside of the shape there is rounder at the front, and then the eyelid comes over. So just something like that. Now he doesn't look like he's staring madly like he was before. So he's got that line of shading behind the eye, and the sun is over here, so he's being hit by the light coming in this direction. So the back of his body is going to be darker than the front of his body. So that's why you can see I'm just doing very soft, very gentle back and forth down the length of his neck. And then his dark feathers start here. And I'm just going to basically scribble in the shape that I'm seeing there, where the gray feathers are. And I'm adjusting my shape, which is to just keep it within the confines of my outline, which is kind of not giving me the exact shape, but again, I don't care. It's just a sketch. Now, he's got these shorter feathers that are up here, and again, it's really hard to tell in this photograph. It's not well, at least in my printout, I've lost my digital copy. My tablet turned off, but I can't see very well on this printout. So as far as getting detail in, I mean, I know that his feathers back here are shorter, and they kind of overlap the feathers that are underneath. And that's why you've got this darker shading along here. Something like that. So I just want to give you the idea of how you would shade for this. You want to make sure that your shading is showing that this area, all this gray area, is going to be lighter, or sorry, is going to be darker than all the other white area, which we will shade eventually, but I want to get these darks in first. So I'm just scribbling back and forth. I'm not attempting to make this look like the texture of feathers. That's not the purpose of this. I just want to get in a general idea of where the darkest darks are and the lightest lights, just to kind of give it some form so that you can tell, okay, it's got some darker feathers here. If you've gone too dark on your shading, which I may have, then you can just come in and lift a little bit of it out. with your kneaded eraser. And again, if you do have a 4H, I would suggest using that for your shading. I would use the HB for this area because it is darker, but if you use your 4H for your shading, you're going to get much subtler effect. So I'm just shading in underneath the belly here, and you can see this 4H gives me a much lighter shade. And he's got all the shading, but the front of his neck is left more white. So just something like that. And then the last of these feathers are white. So we're not going to make them dark. I might go back in here and just emphasize that this is darker. Something like that. And then that tail feathers are really distinctive on a gull. They're black with those white tips. And those are actually, I do believe those are actually the, where each white tip is, that's actually a feather. It's not dots on one feather, it is the actual different feathers there. So you can draw in these little C shapes, and then you can take your pencil and fill in dark to leave just those little end bits of the feather. And then the feather underneath, actually those are not the feathers, though they're, well, it's more the end of his body, I think. It's coming up like that. So if you need to go back in and clean your lines up like I'm doing, you can do that. His shape is not very good. Mine is way too, he should be thicker down here, I think. Something like that. So yeah, sometimes you'll have to adjust and, or not. You know, it's totally up to you. If you've made a mistake and it really bugs you, then you can go in and fix it. But if it doesn't bug you, then just remember it's just a sketch. That's a little bit better, I think, because now his legs are way too short. And that's why I don't usually, if I make a mistake, I just leave it, because you end up having to adjust everything. And if this was a drawing, that would be a totally different thing. Then you would have to make sure it was turning out right. But okay, so there's your seagull, more or less. Is everybody done their seagull? Just trying to see the time. It's half an hour. Okay. So yeah, mine is looking a little more like a dove, I think, than a seagull. I think he's a little bit too narrow, a little bit too fine and delicate for one of those raucous seagulls. Okay, so there's your seagull. And then I wanted to just take a little bit of time to show you some of the techniques that I would use for doing rocks. And it's not going to work terribly well if you're working in a sketchbook, because sketchbook paper is not as good as proper drawing paper, but it'll give you an idea anyway. So I'm just going to very basically do an outline, basic shape of the rock here that he's sitting on or standing on. So for rocks, if I was working on good paper, it would show much more. But basically, I want to look at where the shadows are, And where the light is, there's not a lot of light. The light is maybe on this upper surface. Now, if you do have a hard pencil, and the harder the better for this. So this is a 4H. If you have a 6H or a 9H, that would be good. Because what you would want to do for the rock is you want to start just making little marks. If you have a brush or a stylus with a pointed end, you can basically use that to indent your paper. I'm not going to use it because it's not going to show up on here, but this will show up. And I'm basically making just, I call them texturizing marks. Basically, it's just little scribbles. And I'm not really, this particular rock looks like it's got sand on it. The white, I'm not sure if that's part of the rock or if that seagull has been sitting there forever. We don't know what that is, so I'm just going to more or less assume it's part of the rock. And I'm just putting in all kinds of little scribbles, little tick marks, little, well, just all kinds of little scribbles, basically. And wherever my rock is darker, so I'm going to take my 4B pencil. Now, if I go, I don't think this is going to work on the sketchbook, but I still wanted to show you anyway. If this was on good drawing paper, that hard pencil would have indented the paper. And if I go over it then with a darker pencil, some of it is it's showing where I'd use the brush. It's not showing so much. Where is it showing up on there? Oh yes, you can see. You can see how these little little nicks with the with the harder pencil, they're showing through as all kinds of little, little textures. So you just want to keep changing between your light and your dark. So if our sun again is heading from this direction, it doesn't really show on this rock, but we're going to make this surface, this side of the rock, a little bit lighter than the other side. So if you want to make something lighter but not white, not totally blown out with the light, then you can use a hard pencil to fill in all this. And it's going to, and the harder your pencil, the lighter the lighter your marks will be. So I'm just trying to see here. Quickly have a look. I have my 9H somewhere. So if I use my 9H, it's going to show up dark, but let me just see if I can show you this. I'm just doing texture, just little scribbles, lots of little dots and, things like that. And then if I come in with a 4B on top of that, I do want to leave that all pretty light, so I'm not going to go over it too much. And I'm looking at my reference and I'm just trying to go in now where I see the shadows. But the 4H and the 9H that I've put down before underneath this 4B, they're going to be showing up as this texture. Can you guys see what I'm talking about? Do you see what I mean by the texture that shows up from the hard pencil when you go over top it with the softer one? Well, I'm hoping that you're seeing that. So basically, yeah, I'm just looking at my reference now to see where the shadows are. And once I've got all my little texturizing done with my with my harder pencils, that's when then I will go in with the softer pencil on top. And some of the places where it's really dark, I won't bother to texturize underneath, but I can kind of just, it's all scribbly strokes, so it still gives an appearance of being textured. Okay, so basically then I'm just going to fill in the rock with that kind of a scribbly stroke. Wherever it's lightest, like there's a big patch of light kind of right under, all in here is all pretty light, so I'm going to leave that fairly light. I'll go into it with the 4H, but I'm going to leave lots of space in between my marks, and that way it'll show up as much lighter. You can follow your reference or not for a rock, unless you want it to look exactly like that rock, and this one isn't going to look much like the one I'm going from, but I just wanted to give you just a bit of an idea of how you would get that kind of an effect. And it will be much different if you're using a proper paper. You'll get much different results. And then the other thing you can do for rocks is you can take your blending stump and very gently, let me see, do I have a smaller one? Yeah, just very gently soften some of the effects. Not all of them, but helps it to blend in a little bit. You can also use this to draw some of the effects as well. Scribble in where you want it, like here where it's supposed to be a little bit lighter. Just use very soft pressure, and that's giving you a little bit of texture without having to draw it all in. Just something like that. And we're going to have a little bit darker going back behind here. And you can see this rock isn't terribly it's not a great example of it, but often you can see the planes of the rock, like where they, you know, they change direction and they have different planes and stuff. So you can bake it on this one if you want, just to give it a little bit more interesting shape, because anytime, so this rock looks like it's filled with sand and possibly the remains of meals from the seabirds, as well as the rock, and that's why you're not seeing a lot of different planes on this rock. But wherever the rock changes direction and has a different face to it, you're going to get a shift in the light. So, and anything that is behind where the sun is coming from is going to be more in shadow, and there might be cracks kind of thing in through. So you just have to work at it until you get something that you're happy with. But if you want to practice doing this kind of texture, I would definitely suggest getting a piece of Bristol Smooth and getting your different grades of pencil especially your hard pencils, and just fool around with it and scribbling basically and getting some texture in there. Keeping in mind, pick yourself a light direction and keep your shadows all on the same side kind of thing. So that's basically how you would do a rock. So I would probably, if you want to finish this one up and give it a bit of a nice looking background, you can take a dirty brush. Joanne, you haven't seen these videos, I don't think, before, but if you don't have graphite powder, you can take a 6B pencil or an 8B pencil if you have it, and either I've got a little, some not in camera, I've got a little tea strainer here and a very old short 6B pencil, and I basically scrape it against the tea strainer and I get graphite powder. So you can do it that way. You can use an X-Acto knife. You can use an emery board. Scrub your pencil against an emery board. You want to use a soft pencil. So something in the high B's, like a 6 or an 8B. And then you can get a nice soft brush. This is a really nice soft one. And I don't usually clean them. And you don't need much of this, but it tends to, this will probably go on really dark now. It tends to make a really beautiful, soft, cloudy sky with a brush, a soft brush. So you can just put something like that in around your bird, just to give it a little bit of atmosphere. And I would say that's it. Just something like that. You can also use your brush to soften anything of your rock here if it's not looking soft enough. Not the rocks are soft, but the shading. Okay, you do have some. Great. Yeah, it's easy enough to make though if you need to. So I hope that that was helpful. I hope your seagull looks more like a seagull than mine does. Mine is very dove-like, I think. They are all in the same, well, maybe not. They might not be in the same family. I'm not sure. I should look that up. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me. And I will be back again in 2 weeks. I'm not sure what that date is. June the 4th, so around the 18th, that Saturday. So thanks for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to send me either post on social media or send it in an email or in a message on Facebook or Instagram, I'd love to see what you've done. Okay, so thanks for joining me, guys. We'll see you again soon. Bye. Enjoy your day.